This all happened one night when I was driving a taxi. It's largely a strange experience tied to an urban legend. That night, I was driving through Shingwocha when two women flagged me down. They got in and said their first stop was a place called Ishizono in Kanagawa, and after that, they wanted to go to Sheiko Station in Hadeno City. I thought, wow, that's quite a long trip. But since both destinations were on the same route, it was pretty straightforward. After setting the navigation and confirming the route with them, I started driving. The two women quickly fell asleep in the back seat, and I concentrated on the road. After more than an hour, we finally arrived at the location the first woman had requested. I woke them up, and after they said goodbye to each other, I continued driving the remaining passenger towards Sheiko Station in Hadeno City. At that point, I was driving along National Route 246. As long as I kept following the road straight ahead, it reached the destination. When I got to an uphill section, I thought about how just past the hill there'd be a tunnel. Once I got through that tunnel, it'd almost be there I could speed up. But just as I stepped on the gas and my speed climbed, suddenly there was a figure standing right in the middle of the dark road. He appeared directly in front of me. I was startled and slammed on the brakes, but the moment I hit the brake I knew I was done for. There wasn't enough time. I immediately felt the car hit something and twist sideways. When the car stopped, I was panting in shock. The female passenger was woken up by my emergency brake. She asked me what had happened. I told her I thought I had hit someone, and the car had spun out. I was terrified, nerves on edge, and I anxiously asked her what we should do. She told me we had to take this person to the hospital right away. So we both got out to check around. Looking down the street, I saw a bunch of weird skid marks. I couldn't tell which of them were mine. But even more bizarre, when I checked under the car and on the road, there was no sign of anyone at all. I was completely confused. The passenger and I even searched the bushes by the roadside for about 5 minutes, but found nothing. I apologized to her, telling her maybe I had imagined it or misread the situation. After that, we got back in the car and left. The ride back was quiet, so quiet it felt almost unsettling. But just as we were nearing Sheiko Station, the passenger finally spoke. She said maybe what I hit really was something, not a hallucination. Her words made me nervous. I asked if I should report it to the police quickly. She stopped me. She told me to pull over at a convenience store on the roadside first. She went inside to buy something. When she came back, she handed me a can of coffee. Then she said, "What you meant was, maybe you really hit something, but I never said it was a person." Her words confused me. I asked, "Well then, what did I hit?" She took a sip of her beer and began telling me the story of that stretch of road. You're not the first to have an experience like this. There's always been a rumor about that place. A long time ago, there was a young man named Junichi who died in a car accident on that road. Ever since then, people driving through there often feel like they hit someone. But every driver who stops and gets out never finds a soul to account for the impact. This strange phenomenon seems to be because the spirit of young Junichi is trapped there, and that poor soul endlessly repeats the moment of his death. That's why drivers passing through keep feeling like they've hit someone, but when they get out, there's nothing. She went on, though it might sound like a rumor to many. When I was a kid, there used to be a signpost by the road. It said, "Don't die again, Junichi." I heard it was put up by his parents. They somehow knew their child's spirit was stuck reliving the accident. They couldn't bear it, so they put up that sign hoping to soothe his wandering soul. But at some point, that sign disappeared. She looked at me and said, "So maybe you really did hit something, just not a living person, but Junichi's trapped spirit." I stared back at her, stunned beyond words. I asked her nervously, "Is all of that really true?" The woman passenger saw how tense I was and smiled. "I can't say for sure whether the rumor's true or not, but I really did see that billboard when I was little. With that, she pulled the fare from her purse and handed it to me. Then she joked, "Thanks for the ride. Be careful heading back into the city, don't go running over Junichi again." That was a frightening experience I had before. You could call it a kind of trouble. Back then, I was driving a taxi, mostly the night shift. It was a cold night. I just dropped a passenger at their destination and was driving back toward the Neon Haishilet district to see if I could pick up another fare. I was on a dim side street when suddenly a woman by the roadside flagged me down. After she got in, I glanced at her through the rear-view mirror. Her head was tilted down slightly. Something was clearly off. I asked where she wanted to go. She didn't give me a destination. She just said, "Do me a favor." The request was so abrupt it left me at a loss. I asked what was wrong. She didn't answer. She only said, "Just take me near a certain park, and then I'll tell you where to go from there." I didn't think much of it at the time. I just headed toward the park she'd named. Along the way, I stole glances at her through the mirror. She had delicate features, and there was a mole below one of her eyes. That detail stuck with me. During the drive to the park, I tried making conversation, but she didn't respond. She just stared silently out the window. Her cold, aloof demeanor and presence made me keep sneaking looks at her through the mirror. She never stopped gazing at the scenery outside. The car filled with nothing but the lonely sound of the radio as I continued toward the park she'd specified. After a while, we reached the area near the park. She began directing me into a nearby residential neighborhood and told me to stop in front of a certain apartment building. I checked the meter and told her the total was 4,700 yen. She replied coldly, "Can you wait a moment? I left the money on the shoe cabinet. I forgot to bring it. I'll go get it." I felt a little helpless, but there was nothing I could do. I agreed to wait. I watched her get out of the car. Then I saw her go up to the second floor and enter the third unit. After that, I waited about 20 minutes. She never came back down. I thought to myself, is she planning to skip out on the fare? So I got out of the car and walked up to her door. I rang the doorbell several times, but no one answered. I was starting to get impatient. I knocked on the door and raised my voice. "Excuse me, could you please pay the fare? If you don't come out, I'm going to call the police." After my warning, there was still no movement inside, so I had no choice. I called the police. About 5 minutes later, a patrol car arrived. After I explained the situation to the two officers, I followed them up to the second floor, to the woman's door. The officer identified himself and rang the doorbell, but still no one responded. He had no choice but to contact the building manager. When the manager arrived and learned what was happening, he called the woman tenant on the spot. We all heard the phone ringing inside the unit. That proved she was in there, but no one picked up, because the phone kept ringing unanswered, and because the police had rung the bell with no response. Everyone started to feel something was off. This didn't seem like a simple case of fare evasion anymore. So the officer asked the manager to open the door with the spare key. When the door opened, everything inside was pitch black. The two officers went in, one after the other. Before long, they backed out. One of them started calling for backup, and the other officer asked me to come with him to the station for now. At the time, I had no idea what had happened. I only knew I'd gotten caught up in some kind of trouble. Later, at the police station, I waited for a long time before another officer came over and began taking my statement. I explained everything, how after the woman went back to her place, she didn't pay, said she was going upstairs to get the money. The whole sequence of events. After hearing my account, the officer said, "The woman passenger you described, her features matched the deceased, and mole below her eye." I was shocked, stunned beyond words. I asked the policeman, "So, that possible so? That woman was already dead?" He calmly nodded. Yes. But don't worry, she was confirmed to have hanged herself and had been dead for some time. I thought to myself, dead for some time. Then what was that I just ran into? Shock was still pounding in my chest. But now a creeping fear began to settle. The policeman saw my expression and said, "Sometimes strange things just happen. Best not to dwell on it." After finishing all the paperwork, I was about to get up and leave the station when the officer suddenly asked, "By the way, was your fare for 700 yen?" I just nodded. He went on, "You said during the statement that the woman told you she put the money on the shoe rack, right? Well, when we searched her place, we found for 700 yen there on the shoe rack." Hearing this, I was stunned beyond belief. Was it just a coincidence? Or was the woman who had passed somehow trying to pay me the fare? Whenever I thought back on it, I couldn't shake the feeling the moment she got in the cab. She asked me for a favor. Maybe that favor was for me to come to her home, find her dead, and call the police for her. A few days ago, I was riding the last train home but fell asleep and missed my stop. I ended up getting off at a desolate station with nothing around. Stepping out, the stillness and emptiness chilled me. I sighed, deciding to just walk along the highway toward home. I figured I'd try to hail a taxi on the way. Cabs passed by one after another, but not a single one stopped, no matter how hard I waved. Then I walked into a stretch with no cars and no street altered. Suddenly, a cab appeared in the distance. I raised my hand to flag it down, but the cab just kept going. That's when it hit me. Seeing a figure in white walking on the road in the dead of night must have scared the drivers off. Understanding why the cab kept going, I noticed it had stopped a little ways ahead. Relieved, I hurried over. When I reached the cab, I looked inside. The driver was a man in his 50s, his face pale, looking tense and frozen in place. Seeing his reaction, I guessed he must have thought I was a ghost. So I quickly told him I missed the last train and got off at a desolate station back there. Could you give me a ride home? Hearing that, he visibly relaxed and opened the back door. But just as I was about to get in, I hesitated. There was already a young woman sitting in the back seat. I was surprised. There's someone already in the car. The driver glanced back, confused. No one's here. I bent down to check, but the woman I had seen was gone. Puzzled, I figured I must have been tired and mistaken. I apologized. Sorry, I must have seen things. Then I got in, told him my destination, and we took off. The car felt ice cold. I hugged myself and asked him to turn up the heat. Still, the chill wouldn't go away. It was so cold I could barely stand it. I silently endured, waiting for home. The driver suddenly said, "You really scared me back there." Seeing someone in white in the middle of the night, I thought it stumbled on a ghost. I smiled, understanding his fear. No wonder none of the taxis stopped for me. Who'd stop in a situation like that? He said, "I stopped only to check if it was really a ghost. I've never seen one before." So I was curious but scared too. Since we'd accidentally triggered a ghost story, I decided to keep the conversation going to distract myself from the cold. I asked, "Have you ever experienced anything scary while driving?" He paused a moment. "Nothing scary myself, but one of my colleagues did. Something he still feels guilty about. That was over 10 years ago. On a heavy rainy day," he began. "A woman flagged down his car, got in, told him her destination, and they set off. That morning, my colleague had a terrible fight with his wife right from the start, so his mood was already dark. And back then, he wasn't great at controlling his emotions. That day, his anger boiled over, and he unleashed all that fury through the gas pedal on his way to work, because he was speeding so fast. The woman in his taxi got scared. She kept begging him to slow down, but instead, He pressed harder on the accelerator, driving faster and faster. At that moment, all he wanted was to vent his rage. He completely ignored her terrified shouts. It wasn't until the woman threatened him, saying she'd call the police and file a complaint with his company, that he finally pulled over to the roadside. "Fine. I won't charge you. Just get out," he snapped. The woman hurled insults at him, furious, threatening to get him fired and make sure he had nothing left to stand on. But he just thought, whatever, if I lose this job, he'll just find another taxi company to work for. She got out of the car in a fury, but she was so angry that after slamming the door shut, she kicked it hard. That kick reignited the spark of anger he'd been trying to let go of. He honked his horn angrily, opened the door, and got out. He wanted to teach her a lesson. In the pouring rain, his face twisted with rage as he stared down the woman. Then he started walking toward her. Maybe seeing his fierce expression scared her. She bolted across the street. Then, out of nowhere, a small truck hit her as she ran across the road. She was thrown violently, and almost immediately, a speeding car came barreling after her, racing right over her neck. My colleague was so shocked by the sudden accident that he jumped back into his cab and sped off, fleeing the scene. Afterwards, he never found out if the woman survived or not. The police never came after him, but he told me even now, at night, he often dreams about what happened that day. The whole ordeal left him full of regret. It changed him into a gentler person. He also started donating large parts of his earnings, trying to wash away the guilt that still haunted him. After hearing all this, I fell silent. A heavy gloom settled over me. The cold air felt even colder now, and goosebumps crawled all over my arms. I thought to myself, I shouldn't have asked about this. Why did I have to hear such a terrible story? The rest of the ride was quiet, and when we finally reached the convenience store near my house, I hurriedly paid and stepped out. As I walked toward home, that story kept echoing in my mind. Suddenly, I remembered something else, something strange I'd seen just before I got in. On impulse, I glanced back at the taxi. The driver gave me a nod in greeting, but I didn't respond, because right then, I saw a pair of pale, slender hands reaching out from behind the driver's seat, gripping her neck.